You can sign up to testify at the table outside of the auditorium throughout the session. So if you didn't think you were going to testify but are moved to do so, please feel free to sign up there. Each person will get 3 minutes to testify. There will be a stop clock to help guide you and stay on time. For those testifying, we will invite you up in groups of 4 so we can be eye to eye to see you and hear you. Please come up to the chairs to my left, no, to my right, sorry. If you prefer to testify at your current seat, you can inform our support staff who will bring you a microphone. After you testify, please stay in the chairs for follow-up questions. After Q&A, we will ask you to return to your seat so the next 4 people to testify can make their way up. This may take a couple times to get, so please be patient throughout this process. We'll make sure that everybody has all the instructions. We also have worked to create group agreements that set boundaries and mutual respect among attendees, and posted in this room are group agreements developed at our very first input session in Staten Island, and they are, I'm sorry, they're outside. So they're outside, but they're your standard. Those of you used to, one mic, respect, etc. So thank you for being here. So I'm going to call the first 4 people: Roxanne Delgado, Juliana Leite or Leite? Okay. Come on up. Edward Garcia and Rachel Brown. All right, so we'll start with Roxanne. Whenever you want, you can have use that microphone, or that microphone too. I'm sorry, whichever's easier for you. Wait, it's not on. Hold on. So no, that's fine. We just want to make sure that we can hear you.
Testing. Okay. All right. Thank you, Commission. I'd like to address an issue regarding Committee Board 11, the Bronx Committee Board 11, that does do harm to people of color communities. I would like to present 3 recent issue cases demonstrating that they do harm the community of colors in my district. First one, at a recent board meeting last year, a committee board member made jokes during a public meeting when regarding a drug clinic proposed nearby a school. I was in opposition because it was too close to a school. The owner happened to be a Latina, and the board member made a joke that she was out of the country buying drugs from Colombia. And I was upset not only because I'm being Latina, was offended by it, but also because it undermined my advocacy against this drug clinic based on its proximity to a school, not because she's Latina. Fast forward, the full board voted on a motion to mandate sensitivity training to this board member. They voted down on this motion and they made jokes about it, saying people should get over it. Fast forward to, unfortunately, this board member passed away this year, and rest in peace. I'm not holding a vendetta against him, it's about the process. They decided to do co-naming a street after him with no public input, and they fast-tracked it to the city council, which might be voting on it later this year. I have no animosity towards this man, but this is how they did this. It's an affront to the Latino community, any community of colors. Another issue, state liquor license. This community board has a history of targeting businesses owned by Black and brown people. This was reported in the Bronx Times, Curvin's, owned by a female Black owner. And female Black owners own less than 1% of small businesses in the entire country. So they targeted her since the beginning that she opened her business a few years ago, stating that they wanted a bakery there. So they actually forced her to sign a stipulation limiting her hours, which affected her during COVID-19. Recently, she had an outdoor dining, not because she decided because of COVID-19 mandates. And they had a public meeting where they made jokes that her outdoor dining is a monstrosity, that they hope she's breaking the law because they're going to report her. And it was reported in the Bronx Times. And then they also targeted Gasolina just last month, where because a landlord, is my time running out? Because a landlord complained about noise, without any notification, without putting it on the agenda, they decided to accommodate this landlord and to send a motion of objection to the state liquor license, stating not to renew their license. And the last one, just recently, a Spanish-speaking owner, they pressure her to sign a stipulation where she cannot even have a pool table at her premise. And because she spoke limited Spanish, you could tell that she didn't understand the state liquor license process. She actually thought they had authority where she had to mandate their conditions. But yet recently, the hunting club owned by Albanians was raided by the state police. Arrest was made, yet the board renewed their license, saying that they should have the benefit of the doubt. This is crazy what I have to go through. Lastly, it was reported in the New York Times how a homeless shelter was relocated because the council member Jonah had own property there. But even before that was revealed in the New York Post, I was actually against them relocating the Stillwell shelter, because when they did this alternative site with no public input, they were against the original site because they said it was too close to schools and homes. But the alternative sites were actually much closer to schools and homes, but the only difference was the demographics. Stillwell is majority non-Black or white, non-Black and brown. The alternative was mostly Black and brown homeowners and school children. Now, there's more issues of how this board has hurt this community, but I'd like to make some proposed solutions, because this is why I'm here. Number one, ideally eliminate the board. Number two, make the district manager an electable position where he's accountable to all of us, not just 40 bigots or 25 bigots on the board. Lastly, mandate city agency to meet with the area impacted by their proposals, because unfortunately, a lot of the city agencies go to community boards. Most of those members, besides the bigotry, don't understand the neighborhood or don't care about the neighborhood, and they make decisions where without the public input, and a lot of times the public is not aware of these decisions until after the fact. So if we had issues in my area, Pelham Park, where the parks made issues, and I was not aware of how the community board voted, and they voted usually not in the best interest of ours, and they make backdoor deal with like, oh, we want you to fix our park, and you could do this over here, because we don't care about this section of our community. Thank you for your time, and I'll send you detailed testimony.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Have a seat, because there will be follow-up questions. Juliana? You're not going to testify? Oh. Edward Garcia?
Mind if I take the mic out of the stand? Yeah. Okay, cool. Good evening. Okay, sorry. Cool. So my name is Edward Garcia, and I'm a staff member of Northwest Bronx Community and Closure Coalition. I'm also a founding board member of the Bronx Community Land Trust. And in the Bronx, New York City, we're in a critical moment that calls for courageous leadership to take bold action beyond our immediate crisis to build transformative change. And we know that the Bronx has been too long known for challenges and inequality, and the history of our borough is complex. It includes devastating racism, redlining, disinvestment, but it also includes inspiring community-led rebuilding efforts and grassroots organizing from residents against rezoning plans that have been introduced to our communities. And decades of community efforts to bring back investment and rebuild our borough, and now rezonings and unaffordable housing projects, inhumane evictions fueled by predatory equity, and sustained generational poverty. The changes we've seen in the Bronx reflect a myriad of local, state, and federal policies and economic development plans and urban planning process that often excluded community and yet have starkly shaped the lives of our residents. And the city of New York currently owns many vacant land and underutilized lots that should be used for affordable housing and other community amenities rather than for-profit development. And the city has prioritized for-profit developers when giving away public land and dying right. In fact, 75% of housing projects on city-owned land have gone to for-profit developers, even though they're less likely to include community in the development process. And we know that when the private markets gets into community development business, they do not do so for the longevity, but eventually to make profit. Yet the city charter makes this possible, including the charter sets forth framework and should be creating alternative visions where community members can have say over public land. And I'm here to highlight an alternative vision Bronx residents have created for the borough and alternative land and community share opportunities. We're clear that we cannot invest in short-term solutions to address systemic inequalities. Second, I'm couldn't show my testimony. Living with the Bronx has not been able to go back to normal. Living with the highest rates of unemployment, unsafe and poor housing quality conditions, landlord harassment, rising displacement, and one of the worst health outcomes is not normal. We must take a different approach that responds to the immediate issues facing our community and work towards long-term stability. Transferring public land to community land initiatives, such as community land trust, is a concrete way to develop the infrastructure that curbs immediate displacement and build long-lasting shared community wealth and governance. Am I completely out of time? Great. So just 30 seconds. The proposal is that New York City must direct all public land to resident-controlled community land trusts and other community-based not-for-profits to create permanent affordability and meaningful tenant and community control. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Rachel Brown.
All right. So I'm going to kind of pick up where Edward left off. Excuse me. I'm here today as a representative of the Western Queens Community Land Trust. And we're a new nonprofit in Queens made of community members who are fighting for democratic and equitable land use. Many of us have grown up in Queens or lived there for decades and are outraged by the rampant gentrification that has undermined our communities and threatens to turn our neighborhoods into playgrounds for the rich. Right now, the Western Queens Community Land Trust's first project is to convert a more than 600,000 square foot publicly owned Department of Ed building in Long Island City into a community center with affordable commercial rents for manufacturing and other small businesses that have been pushed out of Queens, and also for artist studios and food co-op and rooftop farm and many other community spaces that the community has dreamed up over the last couple years. The city planned to give this building and this land to Amazon for their headquarters, but the community outcry caused them to abandon that plan. So since winning that fight, we've fought off other for-profit developers who want to turn this building or piece of land into more luxury development. And for anyone who has visited Long Island City in the last 10 years, you've seen that Long Island City does not need more luxury development. What we need is affordable housing, affordable spaces for small businesses. We need affordable spaces for community spaces, for communities to come together. So the Western Queens Community Land Trust is a member of the New York City Community Land Initiative, like our comrades here. And we're in an alliance of social justice and affordable housing organizations committed to winning housing for all New Yorkers. So we demand that public land stay in public hands. And we're calling on the Racial Justice Commission to develop a charter amendment that will ensure that city-owned land and housing be awarded to community land trusts and other community-based nonprofits rather than for-profit developers. As he said, there are lots of vacant and underutilized land plots across the city. So let's give it to the people. Let's not give it to for-profit developers. CLTs and other nonprofits that are accountable to the communities that they are from, that they are rooted in, will truly keep the housing and the commercial spaces affordable for a long, long time, forever, for permanent. That's the way CLTs work. So if we want to dismantle structural racism in this city, we must amend the city charter to require that community land trusts and community-based orgs are given priority to develop their land, in their own communities. No more selling off land for $1 to for-profit developers. Sell it to community land trusts for $1 so we can make real change in our communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This is like a theme. We were in Brooklyn on Monday, and I don't know if you all organize across the city, but you're having a good impact, because this has been, that was very, very much the theme on Monday. So commissioners, do you have any follow-up questions? No. Oh, well, I have a question. Go.
Go ahead,
Okay.
please.
Well, I just wanted to address Ms. Delgado's statements about a community board, and ask you a follow-up question, because as the commission, we can't do anything specifically about a particular community board. What is of concern here is that the charter already explicitly does say, right, that community boards should reflect the constituents and the communities they serve and they work in. It seems that that may not be the case in the situation that you're in. And so I don't know if you have a recommendation as to, I know one of the recommendations was to outright eliminate the community boards, or that particular board, the community board 11, or all community boards. Oh, I see. So then can you go through your 3 recommendations again, please? Because I don't think I just want to make sure I got them right. Here's the microphone.
When you hear community board, what comes to mind is community, but actually it's actually anti-community. Because if you eliminate all the issues within community board 11 regarding the misuse of power, abuse, and bigotry and selfishness, community boards actually circumvent the community. Because a lot of times agencies make decisions that impact community, certain area of a community district, and many members are not, regardless of race or color, don't live in that particular area. They don't seem to have much knowledge about that area. They don't seem to have much interest in that area. Mind you, they're volunteers. They're not being paid to research the area. And most of the time they advise on decisions that actually has done more harm to the area impacted. And then when people say, well, why was this done? Who decided this? We didn't hear about this. The agencies, I won't name them here, say, well, we did what we had to do. We went to the community board and they said it was okay. So that's why I think that is, and actually it disempowers, because you were saying this group, but we don't need to have a group. I'm actually the founder of Friends of Pelham Parkway. I'm not speaking of Friends of Pelham. For 5 years, I'm actually the founder of Friends of Pelham Parkway. For 5 years, we actually have been able to get volunteers, in some cases, up to 40 volunteers to care for our parkway. And you will never think people care, because when we go to public meetings, there's no one in attendance. But it just takes one person to organize. And because people have that yearning, that interest to care for the community, because their kids live there, they live there. But actually, they don't have that from our community board. It actually disengages, because they don't care for much public input, and people are disengaged. There's not that apparatus to organize. But if we have that public meeting from city agency, people like myself or my next door neighbor will organize. Like they say, oh, I don't like this, so let's organize. Because people just tend to organize when we're against something or for something. We don't need to have money or name.
So that was, eliminating all boards was
My first
your
recommendation.
first. What was the second?
District manager, it should be an electable position. Community Board 11, he does not live in the Bronx. He just caters to the whims and wills of certain community board members, because they determine his raises, they determine if he continues holding that position. Meanwhile, or any other one for the public calls him, like he just dismisses, call 311. Or I don't have nothing to do with this. Stop harassing me. You're taking up my time, this is response. But if I was voted for him, or he'd rely on my vote, he'd be like, oh yes, Ms. Delgado, how can I help you? That's not the case here. And he doesn't even live in the Bronx, so why should we care about this community? My last one was that city agencies should be mandated to meet with the community impacted. They find it very easy to go to the community board, make that presentation, get everything rubber stamped, make some deals like the community board, hey, Parks Department, fix our playground and we'll go ahead and, they have done that in public meeting where like, what can we get in return if we agree to this? It was done, I made a conflict of interest complaint regarding that.
Okay, thank you very much.
I really hope this is changing. It actually harms our community. Thank you.
Yeah, the question is for the land trust speakers. One is, like for the Long Island City land trust. I mean, do you have financing like already lined up for like developing that 600,000 square feet of space? I mean, I think one of the concern would be like having the city mandated turn over city-owned property, to land trust. Is that not the capacity to develop it to use, right? So I think that's one question I have. And then the other question is like whether, is it something where we should have like certain kind of size of lot, for example, that should be mandated to turn over to the community, such as like, for example, 5,000 square feet less. That's clearly something that the local community organization could actually put to use or develop as a first step, or is it all or nothing?
Well, in terms of the size of the space, I think, COTs are beyond housing. So I think ideally, right, if you're thinking about like multifamily and thinking about the maximum amount of units, you'll definitely seek to go towards the bigger lots. But I think, there's always long, also for other kind of usage, such as gardens as well. So I think, all public lots should be going to community land trust. And I think, community could find use of it, whether it's housing or something else. And, I don't have data on this, but and I'm sure you add on this. But actually, probably most of the public land that goes to private developers, they actually use city subsidies to build affordable housing, quote unquote. So I'm sure that even private developers will leverage city subsidy and other, number of public dollars to actually build on public land.
Yeah, I agree that any size land, all size plots should be given to community land trust and community-based nonprofits that are rooted in the community. Because, yeah, like you said, there's any number of uses that can come into play. From a small plot can be like a really great garden. Like, I mean, you can raise a lot of food. You could grow a lot of food on like a very small plot if you're efficient with it. So yeah, and then all the way up to the building and the plot that we're talking about in Long Island City, which is quite large. It is an ambitious project for us to try to do as our first project. And so we're at the point where we are incorporating as a nonprofit. So we're new, not compared to them who've been around for a really long time. But we have received a $20,000 grant so far. And that's what we've been working on this year with, we hired an architect to do a feasibility study, and we've been doing visioning sessions in the community, online and in person. And she's putting together a report that will be ready in December that will show all the different uses that this building could have. And so, yeah, we're not quite to the point where we have a huge amount of money in our bank account, but we are also talking to nonprofit developers, namely Manny is kind of who we're talking to about potentially taking this project on with us and the community.
Can I
I
add some?
just want to acknowledge Commissioner Yu has joined us. So do you want to briefly introduce yourself? Yes.
Good evening. I apologize for being late. There was a broken car on the Bruckner. And I think I was coming from the very tippy top bottom of Manhattan, and I've been in the car for an hour and a half. But I'm really excited to be here and to hear about all the great ideas you have from the Bronx and from all the residents. So it's a privilege for me to be here. So thank you very much.
Do you mind if I ask something else on what the gentleman said? And also like public, doesn't mean that COTs wouldn't be able to partner with private developers, right? Because I think that's a misconception. And it is possible that community land trusts can partner with a private developer who can leverage private and other kinds of financing. But it will be a different kind of power dynamic, right? Where the COT is setting the terms and is developing the criteria rather than kind of bringing the COT like just to hold the land after the plan has been developed, or kind of like excluding them from the development process. So I think it doesn't mean that potential private investment can be brought into a project connected to a community land trust. Not that that's going to be the case for the Queens.
I seem to remember that Battery Park City is a land trust, is a community land trust. And what that makes me want to ask is, like, a lot of people used to talk about housing cooperatives in the same way that you're talking about community land trusts. It's a good thing, it's community. But if you go to the Upper West Side, those housing cooperatives in luxury buildings are some of the most racist, exclusionary organizations, and they're the opposite of like racial inclusion or the way you're talking about community. And I don't know a whole lot about Battery Park City, but when I walk through there, it doesn't really strike me as an extremely diverse and inclusive and economically affordable place either. So if the city were to say land should be turned over to community land trusts, how would the city ensure that the land trust is not a racist, exclusive kind of organization? What is it that you would suggest, in addition to just saying hand it over to a land trust, to ensure that it actually does the things you're talking about? Is that clear?
I mean, I guess in our case, so Northwest Bronx is the parent organization of the COT, and I think you're bringing a very interesting point. I think it's something that is happening where a lot of community land trusts that have been incorporated don't have strong ties to the community, and I think for us, our understanding is that for a community land trust to succeed, it has to be grounded in community, and this is why like Northwest Bronx incorporated a community land trust. It's only a year old, but it's actually like tied back to a almost 50-year-old organization that has oversight. So I think kind of maybe examining the kind of connections to the community and other community efforts, right? Because I deeply believe that in order for a community land trust to work and to be sustainable, it has to stay grounded in organizing. And if it kind of loses that essence, it will become, a regular not-for-profit developer, technically.
Yeah, and in our case, since again, we are a new CLT in the last few years, but if you look at the members of the board and you look at the members of the CLT, we've all been involved in organizing in Queens for a long time. And I mean, that's kind of how it came together, was a lot of these different groups across Queens, all the way out to Flushing, Jamaica, that came together against the Amazon headquarters coming to Long Island City, so you can see that our membership is made up of a lot of community groups that have been around for a long time. And I think you could look at that. Also, another thing I was going to add is you can look at the mission statements for these CLTs, because it's definitely in our mission about being racial, like in economic justice, like all of these things are in there, and in terms of keeping things deeply affordable for the community.
if I could just follow up, I think it would be good if your movement could actually suggest to the city, and you could do this later, ideas or provisions that could apply across the board. I mean, I understand, and I'm very familiar with Northwest Bronx Coalition. I trust them, but you can't do policy just based on, I know you, I trust you, and then set a policy that applies citywide to everybody, because you just can't do a policy for a handful of organizations who you know. And so this, I think the city it'd be helpful to have criteria, because the minute if the city were to say, all land goes over to land trust, guess what? People would be forming land trusts right and left, and they wouldn't all be like you, but they would try and sound like you, until they got the land. In 2012, the federal government gave the state $6 billion for Medicaid reform for quote unquote safety net hospitals. Those are hospitals that serve people on Medicaid primarily, safety net. As soon as the state got the $6 billion, all of these wealthy hospitals that don't admit poor people suddenly they call themselves safety net hospitals so that they could go get that money, and they did. So that's my worry. Just when we're formulating policies and rules, considering things for the charter, we have to worry about unanticipated consequences. So that's what I'm pushing for. And if you have any ideas about criteria that could help us kind of ensure that things stay on mission, that would be really helpful.
Same with you, Ms. Delgado, I would say, because, while we don't know whether we're going to pick up a community board-based, initiative, and the charter already has certain language in there about the representation. And that's another example of what Deputy Mayor Thompson is saying. So the charter already has, a mandate, if you will, or at least a strong requirement of the composition of school boards, of community boards, and it may not be happening. We need to really think about that. So,
May I please address that?
Yeah.
Hello. First of all, I was at those two city charters where they proposed, I think Cesar Perez and another chair proposed term limits for community board members. That's been grandfathered. So they have the additional 8 years before they're termed out. Second, the demographic. Unfortunately, community board represents different city council districts. This one represents 13, 12, and 15. 12 and 15 majority are Black and brown community. But 13 is the issue where there is still a minority Caucasian, but they tend to be reflective majority on the community board. And some of them have now self-identified where they're half white now and they're half people of color. So they could diverse the community board per paper, but it's not really diverse in reality. So there's, and I hope you address the community board, because this has been where we have a community board that's targeting small businesses owned by Black and brown community. We have them making bigoted remarks in public meetings, and even not having a street code name after them. We have them targeting, making decisions where their area is addressed, but our area is neglected. And they're denying generations of potential within our community, where there's young people who have so much skills, whether it's communication, creative art, who can contribute to a community and become organized and own their own nonprofit, instead of having white saviors to come down the neighborhood, creating a nonprofit and getting the 6 salary digits, and then that nothing ever improves for us. There's so much potential, but this community board has killed that potential because of their little ego, where they want to maintain power at the cost of the rest of the community. And that has been going, and my neighbors say, well, they're dying out. Yes, they're dying out, but do we have to wait till they all die out before we get the changes? I mean, this has been very bad. The fact that I'm here, look how many people are here, because you took away the power of the people. When you don't give them the power to have a say in decision-making, you don't give them power to have participate, then they don't vote, and they don't come because they say, we're never heard. I've been to several city charters for the last 20 years, and I'm not heard. I'm still coming because it's the right to do, but I'm feeling very pessimistic right now. So I hope you take this as a mandate because it's very important. As a Friends of Palm Park, we actually grow things from the roots up. In order to empower people, it has to come from the ground up. You have to address community boards. You have to empower the people,
Right. Thank you.
especially the young generations.
Thank you. Thank you all for your testimony. We really appreciate your input. We have another commissioner. Um, So, sorry about that. I did not see you there. So do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, good evening. My name is Larry Daniel Favors, and grateful to be here and appreciate the comments that I was able to overhear. Thank you.
So we'll fill you in because the very organized Community Land Trust folks we're back.
That is excellent.
Yes. So thank you very much. We greatly appreciate it. And if we could have Cecile De Laurentiis come up, please. Yeah, we'll get the timer going. You can use that microphone. Definitely. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Cecile De Laurentiis. I am a resident of Woodside, Queens. I'm adding my voice to the CLT chorus. I'm also part of the Western Queens Community Land Trust, and here in support of all the other CLTs that are members of the New York City Community Land Initiative, all their members fighting for racial justice in the city's process of disposing of public land. Also want to give a shout out to the Bronx CLT. I know some of the folks there and they're fantastic. I want to note, addressing a little bit of your question, Commissioner, about sort of our Nicely's proposals, the New York City Community Land Initiative's proposals for these policies that kind of build in more protections in terms of giving land to CLTs and nonprofit developers. The New York City Community Land Initiative, or Nicely, is also pushing for requirements that land, any recipient of city-owned land, keep development on that land permanently affordable and engage tenants and community members in meaningful decision-making over land use, as well as to require the city to transfer the city-owned land for less than fair market value, which historically has often been done for for-profit developers for $1. So giving it to groups and like CLTs and making sure that there are those protections that do keep it permanently affordable and make sure that the community actually does have a say in how that looks. That will be a critical change. I will echo what others said in their testimony. For the Western Queens CLT in particular, Queens has been called the most diverse place in the world, a home for immigrants and a plurality of communities. Artists, street vendors, manufacturers, small business owners are what make it the vibrant place that it is, and people care passionately about their communities. So they pushed Amazon out to everyone's shock. No one thought that was going to happen. And they didn't just say no, but they immediately proposed an alternative, which was the Western Queens Community Land Trust. Many of the same people came together and said, if the city was going to give away this building to Amazon, then they should give it to the community. Addressing the financing question also briefly, a pro forma was drawn up at the outset of the formation of the Community Land Trust, laying out how this enormous building actually could be developed. There are people with grant administration experience involved in the CLT, including myself. That's what I do for my day job. And the New York City Community Land Initiative, the last thing I'll kind of say about the accountability and co-optation question. You've noted that we've all been organized, that we've come from all over the city, that there's all the community land trusts around the city are talking to each other, and they're all locally based. Many are coming from long traditions of Black and Brown organizing, as Edward noticed with Northwest Bronx. And the Community Land Initiative itself was rooted in organizing by Picture the Homeless, so people that were most directly affected by the housing crisis. So that combination of highly local governance and also this umbrella organization to sort of keep us all together, keep us accountable and talking to each other and making sure that we both have the local voice and the organized push for overarching policy that provides protections at multiple scales. And so I think others have made other arguments that I had written down better than I could. So thank you so much for your time today.
Commissioner Daniel Favors, I wanted to give you the first option for questions, if you had, or, you know,
To the extent that this was already addressed, my apologies for my late arrival. It was a little difficult to hear, and that I think just maybe a function of the acoustics, but was there a specific policy this evening that you or any of the folks to community land trust as it pertains to the charter? Again, my apologies if that was already explicitly my late arrival.
The New York City Community Land Initiative's specific proposals, there's a kind of three-component proposal to amend the charter to account for the disposal of public land by the city. And so number one is requiring the city to prioritize resident and community-controlled community land trusts and other community-based nonprofits when transferring or leasing city-owned land. The second component is to require any recipient of city-owned land to ensure that housing and other development on that land remain permanently affordable and engage tenants or community members in meaningful decision-making over land use. The third component is to require the city to transfer or lease city-owned land for less than fair market value when conveying land.
Thank you. I just have continued to be very impressed by community land trust presenters who have shown up at the hearings over the course of the past several days and weeks. And this is probably beyond what I should say, but I am, as a New Yorker, am very grateful for the work that you all are out doing. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
One of the speakers Monday evening who spoke in Brooklyn in support of land trusts proposed technical assistance, that the city should provide technical assistance for community land trust. And I think she might have said for ULURP also. I can't quite remember, but I thought it was an interesting idea because, you know, I've heard a couple of presentations about the Northwest Queens initiative, and 600,000 square feet is an enormous size, and it takes a lot of capacity to be able to think through alternatives or market or even solicit, you know, bids from potential folks who might want to use it, et cetera. So I'm just wondering if you all have thought about that issue. If there were to be some sort of provision requiring that communities get some technical assistance to enable community governance over land in the community, what that would look like, if you've done any thinking about that or have any ideas.
Hi, oh, sorry. All right. Yes, that is a great point. And I'm afraid I lost my train of thought for a second. The technical assistance. Oh, so I can't speak fully to what the New York City community, others in the New York City Community Land Initiative might say in response to that question. I think the initiative itself is an early effort to kind of to centralize that kind of technical assistance, and the idea being that if things come through through nicely, then they would have resources and ability to replicate that kind of assistance in the locally based CLTs across the city. And I also think it's a very interesting idea to have some sort of way for the city to provide that kind of technical assistance. I actually work for an organization in community development finance that provides technical assistance from a kind of larger centralized bureaucratic place. So I as an individual, I would probably have some ideas about that. I don't want to speak for Nicely or other CLTs, but and I'm sure others would have things to say, but it's a great question, so thank you.
Okay, I don't know if this is possible or not, and I'm not a lawyer, so, but there are a lot of universities and colleges that actually have on their faculty the technical capacity to be of assistance. And it just occurs to me that all of these institutions, most of them are nonprofits that don't pay taxes. And I'm just wondering if it's possible to say that institutions that don't pay taxes should have obligations to help or provide pro bono services at some level for communities that need it. And so that's just something, I don't know if any of you have ever, I think you are getting some pro bono help from some folks, and Professor Wolf and others, and DeFilippis, et cetera, but that's just individual. And when we sit in this commission, we try and think of structural things. Are there things requirements we could put that have the effect of law to try and solve problems like that? Yeah. So anyway, that's just a train of thought. If you have any.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, again, sort of speaking more as an individual, I think that's a great thought, and structural support for the participation of people affiliated with institutions in these projects would be really important, because of course James DeFilippis and Laura Wolf Powers are doing this on their own time, and they don't have any structural support from their institution to do projects like this, except with the exception of when they have a planning studio, which I was actually a part of. I was Professor DeFilippis' student. So I would very much encourage the commission to think about those kinds of structural ways to get folks involved.
So we are going to take a 10-minute break and give a chance to others who may come in to testify. We will reconvene at 6:40, I guess. All right, thank you.
You know, what we're gonna do is keep it in.
Yeah.
Keep it in the savings, and then whatever interest we get,
Yeah.
share with her.
All right, so we're all back. So this is a second call, I guess, for anybody who did not get to testify, who may be in the room. Okay. Well, then I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. Your testimony is incredibly important and your thoughts are incredibly important to this process. Your feedback continues to help shape our recommendations. If you actually know of anybody who would have wanted to testify today and did not, they can submit testimony through our website, or we have a final virtual public session via Zoom on November 18th from 5 to 8 p.m. So spread the word. Also, by the way, when you go into our website and then folks share testimony, they can do so anonymously or by using their identity, I guess. Follow us on social media also, please. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to stay connected. And we are at Racial Justice NYC on Instagram and Facebook, and at Racial Justice NY on Twitter. Everybody have a good night and be safe.